we are with Chef Corey Lee. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And we're talking about your new book, which is really an homage, a tome dedicated to your restaurant. So tell me a little bit about this book, because as you say in the book about the restaurant, it's hard to define, and so similarly with the book, it's not really a cookbook, it's not really a memoir, but it's a beautiful exploration of the restaurant. So tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah, it started with the desire to participate in this tradition of cookbooks. Certainly as a young chef and coming up, I just devoured cookbooks and learned a lot from them.
Yeah.
And I wanted to kind of participate in that tradition. And so it started with that very simple desire, but it really turned into this meditation on cooking and how to devise a menu and why those dishes are important. So in that process, it became this very personal exercise that I really didn't start out with the intention of doing. But that process was very educational for me. And now I think I have a better understanding of why we do things, our restaurants, and the experience we're trying to provide.
And so tell me, for those who aren't familiar with your restaurant, tell us a little bit about the concept. Obviously, you came from the Thomas Keller Restaurant Group, working at Per Se and French Laundry. What was the process for you of opening your own space?
So after years of working for another chef and working within the parameters of that person's repertoire and that person's style, it was this new beginning, and that's also what the name alludes to, Benu. It was this period where we can certainly open our eyes to trying new things, and it was all about creating something new and some kind of experience that can only be had at a restaurant. That was something that was important for us. So it's this incredible period of learning and trying new things and of discovery. One
of the interesting things to me about the book is that you start out by talking a lot about the question that people ask you, which inevitably is, what kind of restaurant is Benu? Which is a hard one to answer. Do you find that with this book you're getting closer to that? You know, you say by the end that people say it's fusion. You're like, okay, sure, it's fusion. Yeah. But is it also important to you to say, listen, like, we're doing our own type of cuisine. It's really hard to box in and kind of explain that through the book?
Well, I think that's a dilemma for a lot of chefs who are working with kind of some creative cuisine.
Right.
It doesn't fall easily into a category, and certainly this was an attempt to answer those difficult questions.
Right.
So I hope that people will read the book and think it doesn't matter what we call it. It's something that we should experience, we should try, and we can decide for ourselves how it fits into our lives, and what we should call it or label it.
And your restaurant is also known for having dishes that are quite visual and beautiful. And this book is a lot of photography. Tell me a little bit about the photography in this book, because, on some level, it's almost photo essays in certain parts of the book where you're really seeing photos more than text. So why the decision to have so much photography in the book?
Yeah, the photography is definitely a big part of the book. And I worked with a photographer named Eric Wolfinger. There's this tone that we agreed on, which is trying to capture the mood of a dish, or the mood of a culture or a country, and it was all these intangible things. And the visual aspect is just as important as the text. So I think they work together.
In the last number of years, you've gone from sort of beginning a restaurant to being a 3 Michelin star restaurant to now having the book. How have you seen the evolution of Benu, and where does the book fit into that evolution?
Yeah, I think it's all about carving an identity for yourself and for the restaurant. And when you start, there's no way you know what the future holds, right?
Right.
So at first, we made a lot of mistakes, and there were things that I look back and I see these dishes like, oh my God, I can't believe we were doing that. But that's part of the process too. But ultimately, it's finding an identity for the restaurant, and the book helped me understand what that identity is.
And what do you think that identity is now?
Well, one is exploring new things. And sometimes the newness has to do with the context of where these dishes or these techniques are served. But it's also trying to offer an experience that can only be had at this restaurant in San Francisco. And that's a big part of our identity, is offering something different, something unique, and something singular for our guests.
And you talk about San Francisco a lot in the book, but also about it not really being, it's obviously not California cuisine, but it also kind of fits into the fabric of the diversity of California. How do you feel with your restaurant sort of fitting into San Francisco and showcasing that in the book?
Yeah, San Francisco shares a lot of things with Northern California, the Bay Area. I mean, certainly the produce and and the farming and working with local purveyors. That's something you hear about all the time. But San Francisco is different because it's the one big urban area, the metropolis in Northern California. It's also an area of great immigration. So those things really make up San Francisco and make it a different city. I think it feels very different from Los Angeles or New York. And we are definitely inspired by the uniqueness of San Francisco, not only agriculturally or with what's available or working with the seasons, but the cultural spirit of the area, which is very unique to the city. And it's different the second you get out of San Francisco.
Right, and you talk about that cultural spirit and also the products that you use and sort of the provenance of those products. Tell me a little bit about the background of some of the products that you're using in the book and sort of how you source and how you wanted to showcase those producers and your ingredients so heavily in the book.
Yeah, I think with outside of the local products, particularly produce, we use a lot of ingredients from the East, particularly Hong Kong and Chinese ingredients, as well as Korean ingredients. But we use them for different reasons. My background is Korean. I'm Korean, so there's an influence there that's more personal.
Right.
And then the Chinese influence, I think, is a bit more deliberate, and it's studied. Living in Northern California and just seeing the concentration of Chinese, especially Cantonese, I became very interested in that culture and their food traditions, and that led to this discovery of Chinese cuisine, and particularly Cantonese cuisine.
Right.
So a lot of my trips have been to Hong Kong for research, for eating, and I've got to meet some incredible people and some incredible suppliers. So a lot of our Chinese ingredients come from Hong Kong.
But it's interesting, in the book I feel like you have this balance between having so much interest and love and respect for a lot of Asian ingredients, especially the Korean and Chinese ingredients, but while also really, the restaurant is not, it doesn't appear that you would call it an Asian restaurant or whatever that means. So how do you find that balance, both for yourself and in writing the book? Because you obviously don't want to kind of be put into a certain category, but of course you're using so many of these, and you're such a proponent of these ingredients. So how do you balance that?
Yeah, it's hard to balance those two things, to be honest. And in some ways it kind of mirrors my upbringing, where people will be like, hey, where are you from? And I never knew what that means, like Korea, am I from New York? Where am I from? So in some ways, when people ask, what kind of food are you serving, or what kind of restaurant it is, I'm met with a similar kind of uncertainty, because for me, this is really American food, and American food means it's a blending of different cultures, different influences, and ultimately an acceptance of that. So when people ask me, I say American, but there is definitely an Asian influence.
And how has that reception been within the restaurant as well as to the book? Because obviously there's there's a certain level of fine dining in the US, and often those restaurants, while not similar, have tend to skew more American in their products or more European in their products. And you're really unique in that way, I think, among that level of dining. So was it important to really include that as well in the book? Because I think there is such an emphasis on your ingredients in the book.
Yeah, the emphasis in the book was really to kind of showcase these ingredients that were maybe they are a little bit underused in fine dining or cuisine, certainly Western or cuisine. And then that's also something that's I think unique to our restaurant is taking these ingredients that are underutilized in a Western context and showcasing them. But my desire is really to offer something new and interesting and different, something that's unique to us. And so as a chef, I want as many tools as possible.
Right, so why not explore more?
So exactly, and that's what it is. It's not this calculated formula where I say I want to take this ingredient and that ingredient and make this new dish. But as a chef looking for ways to offer something interesting and new and evolved, I want to be able to access everything that's out there.
Well, thank you so much for talking to us about your new book. It's really beautiful, and obviously,
thank you.
If you want to pick it up, easy to remember, it's Benu from Chef Corey Lee and his restaurant Benu. Thank you so much.
Thank you.